At the turn of the millennium, the UN outlined some of its targets to tackle poverty around the globe. These Millennium Development Goals are aims that the UN want to bring about by 2015. Sadly, they're a bit off track, no thanks to multinational companies who find loopholes to avoid paying tax in developing countries. Tax havens have been used for decades by companies desperately wanting to avoid paying the tax that they are legally required to. It costs the government billions, and according to some charities, people's lives are lost in developing countries because they are not getting the money they're owed. This week, I spoke to senior economic and campaigns journalist at Christian Aid, Rachael Baird, to find out how much this costs developing countries.
We estimate that developing countries lose billions every year to what we call tax dodging. Every year, poor countries lose around $160 billion to tax dodging by multinational companies alone, and it's considerably more than they receive in aid each year from rich countries. You know, our best calculations suggest that it's such a huge problem that it costs poor countries far more than they receive in aid. The UN estimates that achieving some of the Millennium Development Goals would cost considerably less than poor countries lose to tax dodging.
But how do these companies do it? Surely the powers that be have methods for controlling companies that are taking these countries for a ride.
Essentially what they do is to use accounting trickery to ensure that the profits they make turn up in tax havens where tax rates are very low or even zero, and where secrecy is very high, so it's difficult to tell really what they're doing in those countries. So the profits turn up in tax havens. They don't turn up in countries where the profits are actually made.
So what does this actually mean? Let's take, for instance, a country like Zambia. The nation has a particular mining company which has mines, staff, factories and sales of, let's say, copper. But what it does is it claims that it doesn't make any profit in this country where it does all the work. It makes its profits in a tax haven where there is very little, if any, tax to pay on the money it makes. So the country that houses this company loses out because it's not getting the tax it should. Now this isn't just developing countries this happens to. This behaviour affects us too.
Something very similar going on in the UK. You know, we've heard a lot in recent months and weeks about companies like Amazon and Facebook and Starbucks, which, you know, there's a perception that something unfair is going on because on the one hand they have all these customers and staff and shops and so on, and yet these companies are claiming that they don't make much, if anything, in the way of profits. Well, the companies are just claiming their profits are made in tax havens.
Now I'm thinking, surely not. In the UK, you couldn't get away with any of that over here. Or can you? The same techniques are being used on us as we speak. So is there really any stopping home-owned multinational companies scamming us and other countries out of much needed corporation tax? I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but what is the government doing about this? Why don't the government change the law to make companies provide information about their accounts not only here, but overseas as well?
Aid is calling for governments to change the law to require multinational companies to use something called country-by-country reporting, and that would mean that a company would have to reveal details such as the number of people it employs, sales, and its profits, and its taxes paid separately for each country where it operates.
Given the scale on which developing countries are cheated out of money, it looks like a massive way of reducing poverty is to get these companies paying what they should be paying.
That's very interesting, Andrew. It's, tax evasion, I think, is a very big thing at the moment. I mean, Jimmy Carr was in the papers not that long ago having taken away millions of pounds in tax evasion.
And as Rachael says, Facebook, Amazon, Starbucks on a big scale, they're just saying that, no, we haven't made any money. But what are you talking about?
See, I've seen this as well in films. The very famous Star Wars, the last one, Return of the Jedi. made over $600 million, I think, at cinema, but George Lucas says it never made a profit. It's a way of writing off what the profits they make, so the people who are entitled to a share of the profits, like sponsors and things like that, don't get as much as they should. It's just a way of keeping the money flowing so nobody can get to it.
Yeah, or taking it to companies that have really lax laws on tax, or don't have the means to get companies paying tax. And it's very easy for companies as big as, the production of Star Wars or Starbucks or Facebook to just pay out money that they won't have to pay in income tax.
It's not like we're talking as in a couple of pounds, though. No. When you're talking in the terms of billions, it's billions. As it says, hundreds of billions of pounds. It's absolutely ludicrous. Yeah. It's something we can't get out of.
Yeah. Well, the UN say that in order to halve poverty by 2015, it'll take about 40 to 60 billion US dollars per year, and developing countries are being cheated out of $160 billion a year. That's about 100 million pounds. It's a lot of money, and the cost of getting these countries out of poverty is a lot less than they would be making in income tax in corporation tax if they were getting it.
I think one of the main problems is, though, when it comes to, as you said there, getting other countries out of poverty, there's a lot of people in the UK, in the EU, across Western civilization, in the more developed countries of the world, and say, well, why should we go over there and fix their problems? We've managed to sort ourselves out here. Why can't they do the same?
I think it's affecting us as well, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it's a very popular opinion, though. It's obviously, it's just something a few people share, because obviously people point out things that are going wrong over here. I mean, there's homelessness over here. There's still poverty in England. And I think their issues are why go and solve someone else's when we've still got ours of our own. It's a very sensitive subject to go into.
Yes, but unfortunately, until this tax evasion stuff gets sorted out, there's not many ways around it.
Sportsmen are a massive tax evasion. A lot of Formula 1 drivers live in Switzerland. And actually, speaking about Formula 1, let's get onto the Formula 1 scene. And with new signing Sergio Perez moving to McLaren next year, McLaren sporting director Sam Michael has said that next season he should be able to deliver with the team. I mean, the 22-year-old Mexican, he was rejected at a seat at Ferrari for supposedly lacking in experience, but he's said to have a good chance for next season's opener in Melbourne, Australia. You just want him to really be able to tackle against teammate Jenson Button, who's got a lot more experience, and he's a very, very good driver himself. But people have reservations about Perez. I mean, he's only scored 80 points and 3 podiums since he began his career in F1. Yet the man he'll replace at McLaren has scored 380 points in the same amount of time and taken 6 Grand Prix victories. I mean, statistics like that you can't argue against. Fair enough, there's the difference between the Saubers and McLarens on track, but it is still a lot. But so sticking with Perez, he more than likely won't be taking part in Friday practice either due to he's suffering from a cold, according to Sauber.
Man flu.
Yes, man flu. Very, very scientifically proven fact, man flu is. It's crippled him for the week, though, so they're on about replacing him with another Mexican driver. I can't pronounce his name, I'm not that good. But Sauber have run into issues recently with Telmec. It's an acronym of one of their main sponsors, and their contract says we only pay you sponsorship while Sergio Perez is at the team, and they're one of the main sponsors. Now, with Perez moving to McLaren, Sauber are worried about losing quite a significant amount of sponsorship money. But Telmacher says they're going to commit to the team simply because the team has managed to do a lot this year with Perez and with Kobayashi. But moving on to the man, as I said, the man he's replacing at McLaren, Lewis Hamilton, he has revealed he's finally started to speak again with former mentor and team principal Ron Dennis. I mean, it's obvious that Ron Dennis was severely hurt by Hamilton moving to Mercedes. Hamilton's been with the McLaren family since he was 13, and that's 13, 14 years he's been with them, nearly half of his life. So I think that's something that's really, really, really hurt McLaren in all.
Very good. What are the standings in the tables at the moment?
Sebastian Vettel leads the championship on 204 points, I think. Fernando Alonso second on 200 points. Only 4 points separate them. I think that's the score. Hamilton's pretty much written off his championship chances. So
he's just sort of trying to stop himself from being embarrassed, really.
Yeah.
Just get as many points on the board. Anyway, well, thank you very much for listening. I'm Andrew McNair.
And I'm Christian Simmons.
You can read more at journalismview.wordpress.com.
Yes, guys. And also, we'll be back next week with another podcast. Bye-bye.